You're listening to a CNA podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Work It podcast. It's Tiffany and Gerald. Now, on this show, we have spoken about what to do after you've been retrenched. And also, we've given you some tips on what to look out for before your company goes through a retrenchment exercise. I think, Gerald, one of the stories that really hit me hard was Luke Zhao's story. He was the person who was retrenched just before his baby arrived. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember that story. It also reminds me of another sad story of retrenchment. I think all retrenchment are sad, right?
Yeah.
But this one sticks out my mind. I know this person, he has special needs. He was working in a company for quite a number of years, I think maybe a decade or so, and he was let go from his job, and his mom died like just a couple of days before.
Oh dear.
So it's like the perfect storm, right? Retrenchment is just one of the most difficult experiences for many people, even though sometimes it's not personal. But it feels like it's personal.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of the table, there's the manager who has to deliver the bad news. But I think sometimes when we try not to hurt people's feelings, managers could also, be accused of using vague words, right? And then they avoid saying you are being retrenched. They instead talk about transitions and new beginnings. And you're told that it's a nice opportunity to rewrite something. So this person on the receiving end, you feel like, okay, you can't really push back because the words feel nice, even if the outcome isn't. It can feel like you have been gaslit.
I think you feel like you're powerless. You're in a position where you can't do anything. And so today, what we want to talk about is really about this retrenchment, the termination notice, right? The way it's being done. Can it even be compassionate?
Okay.
And if you are the one on the other side being let go, is there anything you can do about your situation? So to unpack this episode for us, we are speaking to someone who's seen all the sides of retrenchment process. She's even written a 101 guidebook on the topic. So let's welcome career coach and author Chee Sze-Yen.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Yen, we want to start with some examples of what not to do. So are there like real stories that you have heard or you have seen where if you are the person who's delivering the news, what should you not do?
There are so many horror stories out there, and some of the worst stories I've heard are, I've got good news and I've got great news. You're going to go on a holiday and there you go. Here's
your termination notice.
With severance, and you now get to go that holiday you always wanted. Maybe they have a close relationship and maybe it was part of that culture. Again, no judgment, but maybe because they're friendly and maybe this manager thought that this person could take the job.
Even if during your lunch time, we always say things like, I can't wait for the day I leave this job. And then even at that moment, if you are really served the papers or your termination letter, I don't think anybody is going to go, yay, off for me to go on this, Alaskan cruise right now, right?
Actually have.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the thing about the world we live in today is that retrenchments and severance packages and organizational restructuring is a dime a dozen. You're seeing so much of it that the good thing is that there's less stigma. So if you're going to go out to the universe having been laid off and you just tell your future employer during an interview, I took a package, I received a notification, my company restructured, it's actually okay. There are many people that I've met who are very happy on the day of notification because they know and they've already wanted to leave for a very long time and they might as well just hang out, get the severance, and severance is tax-free in Singapore, and then they get to go start the next chapter, and they're obviously more prepared for it because they've lined up their foundations knowing that they were ready to quit anyway and they were prepared to resign, and maybe the job's just not quite the right fit anymore, or they're feeling a little bit itchy and disgruntled, and I'm like, hey, I think it's time for me to move on, but I hear in the grapevine that there might be a restructuring. Okay, I'll hang out and I'll talk to people in the know, and so there are happy people, so it's not all doom and gloom.
So those who read the signs earlier,
they have prepared for it.
Yeah, they're prepared for it. It seems like this is the opportunity for them.
Yes. And so one very good advice for our listeners is to always keep an eye on the market and to always be networking, both internally and externally, so that you're the first to know if there are any signs. So if you see that train wreck coming, you can sidestep it and avoid it. But there are people who remain quite delusional, who just refuse to see the signs. Their entire team has been gone and they're still thinking, how did this happen? And they're all shocked. So it's up to us. We are in charge of our careers.
So earlier on, you spoke about what not to do when you are the one who has to deliver the news.
Yeah.
So what is the ideal scenario of how to deliver such a sad piece of news? Because you have to do it.
Now, one of the key things in such cases is that you want to help the individual retain their dignity. And that's crucial. So there are so many what not to do's. don't have them escorted out by security. That's huge. There was one major retail giant that did that. Don't have them be blindsided. One day they come in and their pass doesn't work at the check-in
we've heard of those horror stories
right?
before.
But again, in each of these scenarios, there are contexts. And because maybe of the scale of the exit exercise that's happening, they cannot control it. And so the only way to manage crowd movement is by whether or not your pass still works. No judgment here. So what to do is to help your individual retain their dignity. The fact is, they deserve your trust and respect. They've worked for you. If it's a bona fide restructuring exercise, there's no reason to expect that they would sabotage anything, and ensure that you rip off the bandage, but with a high level of diplomacy and compassion.
So would you do this conversation one-on-one?
Yes, one-to-one, and deliver the news directly, as short as possible. Even though it's one-to-one, HR should be in the room.
Okay.
The thing is, there are ideal situations, but in many situations, the line manager or the employee are not in the same country. So then the notification has to happen across a Zoom or a Teams meeting, which also is not necessarily the best, because you can't see the body language. What if the person is crying, or what if they do something silly?
If we're doing this physically, so you say that in the room there will be your hiring manager and then the HR person together with you. Do they follow a script?
They would have some scaffolding to help them with the notification, and they should. But for line managers that don't have that support, then they might inadvertently say the wrong things. One example is we tell line managers not to apologize because it's no one's fault. So don't say I'm sorry, and don't give them false promises of potentially a redeployment. Don't, because this is it. This is the final decision. It was not taken lightly, and that it is not a personal thing. It's not about performance. It is a business decision. It is a commercial one.
So don't say sorry. Interesting. Because I think the natural human instinct, when you see somebody feeling uncomfortable, you will be like, okay, I'm really sorry, or you don't have a job at this point in time. I feel like it's a natural human instinct to apologize. How would you approach this if I am across the table from you?
So the actual notification needs to be done in very short meetings. And the organization needs to have in place quite a few things. You got to think about the logistics, the movement, and at what point do they cut off access to the computers and the systems, and also to have some employee assistants around. So if there's going to be an emotional reaction, there is a consultant or a counselor on standby. There are some organizations where I've heard they've gone to the nth degree to make it as pleasant as possible. So there's like some food, there's a tissue paper, there's some water, make sure that the person is comfortable. But in a nutshell, the notification needs to be done really fast, because the last thing we want to hear as an employee is for you to keep dragging out. You know how some competitions, they drag out the results just for the dramatic effect, right? We don't want that. We want to be told, just give us our dignity and our respect, and just tell me what it is. So usually starting point would be to explain that this decision was not come by easily. You were talking earlier, Gerald, about one of the toughest things an individual has to go through. There are 4 major ones in the psychological world. The biggest one is death of a loved one, a divorce, a country move, and actually a retrenchment. So we need to be able to be compassionate and diplomatic, and to share that this was not a decision that came about overnight. It wasn't deliberate or personal. And then you have to wait for the individual to react. Some people will be okay with it, and some people will go no, or maybe they'll get angry, or maybe they'll cry, or maybe they get accusatory. Ideally, you would then transfer the control over to HR, who would run through some of the things, because the next thing I want to know is, so what are the terms?
Yes.
And what's next from here? So there are organizations, good ones, that would provide extended insurance coverage and medical benefits, and some of them get to take their laptops home. So there are organizations that would provide that support and even give them that career transition. And so then this individual is going to have someone to turn to understand the art of networking and interviewing and redoing the resume.
To have them to kind of transit into something new.
Sometimes some of the people who were exited have been long stayers. The last time they looked for jobs, they were 20 years ago. Yeah, so having some updated support is very helpful.
Gives them some more confidence to make that change, to come to terms with what's happening. CNA ran a LinkedIn poll to ask people if today they had to deliver the news, right? What would they be most fearful of, most worried about, concerned about? And what came out, interestingly, is that the response from the person, the recipient, becomes emotional.
Yes.
Is that something that you see that is quite common?
Yes, I have witnessed, because when a notification takes place, an organization would do well to have an external party on standby so that as I notify you and I'm going, look, maybe you need time to process next door in the next room, there's a person there that you can have a chat with and understand the details of your program, the support structure and all that. So it can be someone from the union, it can be someone from employee assistance, or it can be someone who's a career consultant.
And so this person is trained to counsel.
It's more somebody to sit down with you to help you process the news. And yes, if anything gets into the stressful, the type that requires trained counsellor, you should also have those on standby. Just in case.
You also probably might also need security on standby because some people, maybe their first reaction is anger, right?
Yes, we have seen and heard of stories where they bang the table, but they throw a couple of things. But most of the time, no lah. Most people they understand because again, in this market, given social media and the spread and how everyone's talking about it, it's not new. And I'm happy to see, considering that I started doing this 20 plus years ago, when the stigma and the exits can be very sensitive. Today, it's very run of the mill. Yeah, so much so that sometimes today, they're not surprised if I notify via email.
Yeah.
Because the company is very global and very spread out and the teams are all over the place, and I receive an email asking me for a meeting, but then there's another email that pre-warns me that there is restructuring happening, so I'm mentally prepared anyway, that I know it's happening.
So we talked about the physical sense. Any difference if it's, early on you mentioned that if your manager sits in a different part of the world, would the procedure look slightly different?
Zoom's very acceptable these days, Zooms and Teams, because of COVID that's happening. We can't travel, so they've had to make do. It's not the most ideal because again, the person on the other end of the call is not physically surrounded by support. And that could be something I would worry about. Yeah. But again, I want to set a caveat because there are so many structural, contexts. And in some cases, in fact, I've heard of so many stories where the manager did not know. And the news was delivered by the +2, +3. And the +3 then lets the staff, it releases the staff and notifies the staff. And the manager did not see it coming. Yeah. And then after that, the manager themselves, the notification. So we want compassion for the individual that's impacted, but I'm also asking for compassion for the managers who have to notify the news because a lot of them don't sleep, and
guilt,
not just them, but also the ones who stay. Sometimes there's also survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
So all around, right, like I said, there's no good divorces. I think our best outcome is no news and that everyone's treated as fairly as possible. And so as an organization, before you let someone go, do all your research. Because there was a story about an individual who was asked to come for a meeting, and he went for the meeting all happy, and then he was notified. That was the very day of his 20th anniversary. So he thought he was going to receive an award.
Like a long service award.
But it turned out to be the other news because there was no homework done. So again, someone's on maternity. Do you let them go? Or do you wait until the maternity is over?
Is there any policy that you shouldn't
There's no policy. It's really hard. So do the research to find out, is it a special festival? Did they just lose a parent? So things like that to make sure that your timing is not... It's never ideal.
Yeah.
But again, don't have it in the
There's
middle
never
of
a good timing, but you don't have to pick the worst timing.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good one. So even the days of the week, do you do it on a Monday or do you do it on a Friday?
Yeah. Is there a consideration here?
Again, sometimes it depends, but I would definitely not recommend doing it at the end of the week because during the weekend, they've got no support.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. There are companies that help you to extend your insurance coverage. And this is something that we've heard before, like companies saying, okay, we will let you continue on the company insurance as part of your personal insurance. There's a benefit. Others might go, okay, we will provide career counselors on standby for you to speak with and everything. What are the kind of non-monetary benefits you have seen that companies have provided for their employees besides the two that I've mentioned?
They can be quite extensive. Again, so many different ways of doing it. For example, this is a tech company. So it'd be okay for this tech company to just wipe all the laptops and say, hey, take the laptops with you and use it for yourself. So it can be very unique. I think most individuals are saying, for example, they want to make sure that I've been fairly compensated.
I would care about cash.
Yeah, exactly.
The cash component.
Yes.
But I guess also there is also that much that you can try and get, right, from the cash component, because people always telling me that HR will be quite clear as to how much you're going to get based on, your number of years of service and all to the company. But let's say, for example, okay, my company then decides that, okay, so these are the cash benefits and that's it. right?
Yes.
We don't have anything else
Yes.
that's available for you. But then I know that there's all these other things like, okay, maybe company insurance. Can I ask for these things? Or is it like a straight off the bat, no?
So if the organization is going through some debt, bankruptcy, the pool is going to be so limited. What can I do? Hey, take the furniture, take the chairs. I've heard those stories as well. And of course, there are those larger organizations, and sometimes after they have released the individuals, suddenly there's a bigger bonus pie for those that remain. Again, terrible optics. For example, there are large tech companies I can share, like has been regularly restructuring. So in the early days, for example, in the early 1990s, the organization was known to have no limit on the payout. So you get 1 month for every year of service. Then about 5 years later, there was an acquisition, and then they had to let people go. And then suddenly they changed the policy. Oh, it's 2 weeks for every year of service. No cap. So there's those who have 30 years experience, like, in the company, then they still get only 2 weeks, no cap. And then a few years later, there's another round of restructuring, and now there's a cap. It's 2 weeks for every year of service. It's capped at 12 years. So the payouts change, and it waxes and it wanes with the markets and with margins and
But
with
it makes
business
sense
needs.
because companies cannot have one policy and then stick with it forever.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
It really depends on
Yeah.
where they are, how much profits they're bringing at this point of time.
Yeah.
Because
So-
it's not like stated in the law that,
Yes.
that the
Yes.
companies have to
Yes.
give you something.
Yes, yes. So I was wondering, is there like a point where the person, the recipient of the retrenchment notice can go back to say they have some time to think
Yeah.
through, and they go back and then they tell the HR or the
Yes.
the management, is there something that I can
What
get?
else? Or can I clarify something else? Because when they're receiving the news, they only hear certain things and then they're busy processing.
Yes.
So a lot of the details tend to be lost in translation. So HR is typically available for queries and clarification. So the notification itself is just a notification. It's a short meeting that tells them what's going to happen. So some of them are notified and they still have to serve out, say for example, 3 months. Just to share, right, a long time ago, there was a story about Toyota and they had to remove an entire plant. So the entire plant was going to be relocated elsewhere. All the people were going to be impacted, but they started the notification 2 years in advance. They conducted all sorts of retraining. They started redeploying and they told the people, if you stay till the end, there's this other thing that's left for you.
I see.
But if you want to go, you go ahead. And so they did it so well that even today, the people who left have good things to say. So then, of course, we hear all sorts of horror stories. And that's, again, what tends to spread, right? The bad news.
Yeah.
So for someone who's receiving that notice, right, take your time to process. And then if you have questions or something that you want to ask about, you can and you should go back to clarify and
Yeah.
ask for maybe certain sort of support that you can get. Maybe there's something unique in your own situation that they might not have been aware of.
Yes.
And maybe you can ask whether the company can make an exception to consider offering that to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Yen, for coming on and sharing this. I think, as we said earlier on, there is no good time to deliver the message, but at least we get a sense of how to deliver the news in the best way possible at
Yes.
that point of time and how you can receive it and move forward. So
Yeah.
thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on our Ask Me Anything segment, where we take a work-related question that you have and we answer it on this pod. Today's question was sent in by our listener, Tasha. Here's what Tasha has to say. An envelope was passed around yesterday to chip in for a colleague's birthday gift. The thing is, I barely know them. We've never even had a proper conversation, and this isn't the first time either. There's always a collection going around. Birthdays, farewells, funerals, and it all adds up. I don't want to seem cold or stingy, but frankly, I don't want to pay for someone I don't have a connection with. How do I set a boundary around monetary contributions without seeming unfriendly?
Wow. I love this question because it's
It's very
something that,
relatable.
very relatable, something that many of us often think about and sometimes we feel very obligated to give, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
If today this person is your boss, you're doing a collection for your boss, then I think everybody will be like,
$100.
everybody will be okay with it. But if it's
No,
like,
not necessary. You're assuming that everybody wants
Really?
to contribute to the boss's birthday present.
okay.
I don't think so.
Okay, so for your boss, you maybe not for you.
Boss, I will definitely put in $100.
So on a fun side note, I do know someone, right? I had this really interesting colleague who makes a big deal out of birthday gifts. She really, really puts a lot of effort to get gifts, branded gifts for people on their birthdays.
That she expect it back though.
Yes, she does.
Oh dear.
So I was a recipient of a gift like that, and then I was surprised, like I don't even know her that well.
Okay.
And this was above and beyond what even my friends would give, right? And then I realized that, okay, she does this to many people and there's an expectation of getting it back.
Okay, I don't think that's funny lah. I think that sounds like
That's
a very
stressful. Very stressful. Can I don't get that gift, you know?
Yeah. So what if you are Tasha? How do you tell your colleagues without sounding stingy that you don't want to contribute?
I think it's perfectly fine to just say that you need some time to think about it. And that, okay, you can pass the head around. If I want, I'll put it in.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're not saying no outright. You're just delaying it. And also maybe you could say that, let me think about what I want to do for this colleague instead. It might not be money, it might be a card. Maybe you want to take the colleague out for lunch on your own. So it could be many things. The person who's passing the head around would not assume that just because you're not putting in the money, you're not a team player.
I've seen people say, oh, can you please put down how much money you are putting in the hat? I think that's quite perform. This is not a donation drive, yeah? Right? You don't have to, it's not like tax deductible anyway. If you are the person who's passing around the hat, I think you should just open it up and just say that, okay, if you would like to contribute, then you contribute.
Strongly agree.
And don't need to put the money, the cash value on the card.
I've seen that list of the people and the amount they give being passed around with the hat. So everybody sees the going rate.
Yeah. But you'll feel very stressful because you'll be like, oh, Gerald gives $50? Wow, obviously he's trying to suck up to the boss. Maybe I should also give $50. But you're doing it so unwillingly.
It doesn't come from the heart. I think it defeats the purpose itself.
Yeah.
So I would say if you are the person organizing and coordinating the collection, please don't put the list in there.
Yeah.
Or just pass the hat around, pass the envelope around, make it anonymous.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the collective amount, you just give it to the recipient and then you say this from all of us. You don't want to be remembered as the guy that goes around, oh, he's coming around already with the hat.
Yeah.
It's again collection time.
And I think for Tasha, don't feel obliged. Definitely don't feel obliged to contribute. If you really don't feel a connection to this colleague or you don't really know them, it's okay. I think it's perfectly fine to just say, oh, I will not be contributing. Please go ahead with whatever you guys have planned. Don't feel bad about it.
Yeah, in fact, there's many times that when I was the one doing the collection, I've seen so many people who just say, sorry, Gerald, I'll sit this one out.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly fine. Today, I would think otherwise, then the problem is with me, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So Tasha, I hope that our advice here helps you to feel a little bit better, help you to approach this with a healthier mindset as well. Don't worry about it. And if Tasha, you have a work-related question, do write into us. We are at cnapodcasts@mediacorp.com.sg. This podcast is also on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Me Listen, and YouTube, where a video version of this is at. The team behind the Work It podcast is Ho Pei Ning, Janani Johari, Joanne Chan, Saye Win, Alison Jenner, Nat Fetavero, and Shaza Dalila. Video by Hanida Amin.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Tiffany. Remember, it's always the thought that counts, not the price tag.